Hello, Portal Masters. This is Dash Twisted Storm. For a good while, we have seen dozens of Skylanders making their appearances in the span of 6 games. There are 32 in Spyro's Adventure, but there are also some additional 16 in the next game afterwards. There are some that receive more recognition to the point of appearing outside of their playable roles, while some do not. However, there is one that has received the most compared to even his own comrades. Not even a slight ignorance can overcome his incredible placement in the series. To make Skylanders that is known by everyone today is one small, fresh fish. Oh dear God. Gill Grunt is a water element Skylander that was originally released as part of the starter characters in Spyro's Adventure. They are known as the Faithful Trio with Trigger Happy and Spyro. But even with Spyro's name in the title, the starter pack cover wants you to make sure who is the one to look out for, as Gill Grunt is shown as a cover character akin towards legendary Pokemon and Charizard. Since the success of the game, it has spawned a franchise of sequel after sequel. In its first sequel, Giants, they introduced returning characters as reposes. They are indeed back with additional assets such as cosmetics and weapon upgrade, but they are pretty much the same character as they were before. What makes them different in game, you ask? They have an additional upgrade that makes them even stronger, known as their Wow-Pow power. And they also have the ability to switch the paths back if you don't wanted to use that from before. Gill Grunt, as expected, received his own repose since he is part of the starter pack along with Spyro and Trigger Happy. And you know how they sell like hotcakes in those. Then in Swap Force, they have it again, possibly due to the success of Giants once more. But then Gill Grunt exceeds both his partners in Trap Team, making him the only Skylander to ever receive a Series 4. This may be insane, but remember, Trap Team is also the same game that has Frino as a repose instead of my boy Sunbird. Why is this my favorite again? But before you can be like Matthew Broadwick and Godzilla here and say, well, that's a lot of fish, here's 2 more to put into the pile. Deep Dive Gill Grunt and his vehicle, the Reef Ripper. But before that, Gill Grunt also has his own children in the form of sidekicks and mini Skylanders. He even has a collectible edition known as the Eons Elite during Trap Team's release. While I have yet to get this version of Gill Grunt, it is still astonishing that even after 6 games in, the franchise cannot stop making more and more of this little character. Up to the point that Swap Force made characters like him, such as Riptide and Punk Shock. Thank Master Eon he has never had a legendary Dark or Holiday counterpart of him, otherwise the pond will be less blue and more crowded. There's a lot of plastic in the ocean now! Gill Grunt did indeed make a bigger splash than we thought, and the developers have been overusing him so much. But that still begs the question, what makes Gill Grunt such a prolific character? Was he at least interesting? Is Gill Grunt good to play as the games we want to believe as of today? It may be a tall order, but I am going to tackle him by doing a Skylanders review on him. Skylanders Review is where I analyze each Skylander both in its biography and its in-game to see how well they can stack up compared to the other ones. So, with this one being the first one I will ever do, can this fish jump higher than his breed production? Or we can all agree that there are too many fishes in the sea. Let us place Gill Grunt on our portal of power and find out.
Here the fish!
While Gill Grunt was not one of the first designs to consider as a character such as Spyro, Bash, and Zap, he was later designed during the development of Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, and right away, many of the staffs formed an attachment to this little Gill man. He even became a favorite of Alex Ness, the writer for Trap Team and the voice of Chompy Mage. That makes a lot of sense now, doesn't it? They all thought he was such a fun character to play around with, and even mimic his gibberish lines during office hours saying, "Mushka repita." In his biography, Gill Grunt joined the Gill Men military to seek out his own adventure. Maybe we should tell him the truth. Suddenly, he met a mermaid during this tour, and he was vowed to return to her after it was over. Years later, he found out that the pirates raided her home and kidnapped her, leaving him searching high and low of Skyland. It then caught the attention from Master Eon himself, which has then recruited Gill Grunt as part of the Skylanders. Now with the team, Gill Grunt can now both protect Skylands and to hunt down the same pirates who took his mermaid love. Now Alex Ness later on stated in one of his interviews that Gill Grunt did find his mermaid and give the pirates that kidnapped her an old one too. But with that said, I think it is silly that they kept bringing Gill Grunt up in reposts after that fact. I find the story to be both bitter and sweet. Surprisingly, I find the story to be as romantic and dramatic that I read it the first time. It is not one of those stories that gets better as you turn into adult necessarily, but it is quite of a nice origin story that explains his upbringing and why he sets out to do what he did. However, I have one gripe with this story that still bothers me. If a mermaid was indeed kidnapped, why could Gill Grunt report it to the Gilman Marines? He is part of them after all, so it wouldn't be that much of a stretch for him to report it over to his comrades. Sure, that would got rid of his way of searching her all over Skylands and be hired as a Skylander, but I believe it would have made much more sense. I don't know, it's a nice story regardless, and this development story, while being limited to my findings, is quite fascinating as one of the initial characters of the franchise. Gill Grunt is a gill man. He is a man with fish gills. He is more fish than the average man, and this design reflects that perfectly. From the looks of its design from the first game, you can tell that the design is simplistic, which is great for a figurine that's supposed to sell towards kids. However, I did like it how he has a couple of details to showcase his bipedal stance even on his figurine, such as him wearing gloves with buckle to fit his aquatic features and ankle coverings that also have buckles. I guess his grunt is also a buccaneer. He also has fish-like features that is detailed well, such as his scales from his arms and legs, nostrils that is inset to his face, 2 fangs that implies a mouth, 2 fish glazed eyes, and 3 fins that is like 2 large ears and a mohawk. In each of his variations, his jetpacks and harpoon guns change up. His Series 2 figurine has an upgraded harpoon on his gun and jetpack to indicate that he is beaming with energy. I also love it how Toys for Bob finds some ways to make the characters levitate on his own base without using any of these cheap white plastic platforms that you see on some Amiibo figurines. His Series 3 counterpart, Anchor Away Gill Grunt, is like his Series 1 counterpart, which unfortunately have him feel a lot more subtle compared to his Series 2. Fortunately, body language speaks more clearly than words, as not only his harpoon has a large anchor attached to it, but it also gives his arm a good flex to show his player how capable he is. Though not as capable as the Series 4 repos, and wow, just wow, this is so brilliant. Instead of his harpoon gun that he keeps carrying it around, Tidal Wave Gill Grunt decided to go bayonet onto his enemies by summoning a water serpent underneath them from his freaking water base. I can definitely see why they wanted to design him that way in Trout Team, because that's just made him so awesome. Finally, you have his design for Skylanders Superchargers along with his vehicle, the Reef Ripper. Like its Series 2 and Tidal Wave counterparts, Deep Dive Gill Grunt makes his own water base from his jetpack. That allows him to gain more height in comparison and indicate that he's so powerful that he needs to make a platform for his water engine. That is how you can make Poseidon as a playable character. Speaking of which, you can tell that he has it fully invested in as much water barrels as he can around his wrist, which his buckle would be. Trading his gun for an actual trident makes his appearance more approachable, which makes sense, making the Gill Grunt look more menacing when you see him aiming his weapon at you. He adorns his head with a new helmet that goes over his top fin and rounds his eyes to make it more pop. The attire is very much like a Reef Ripper, which is basically a giant fish as a vehicle. What is cool about this one is that you can make his back fins go left or right by moving around his body. You know, like an actual fish. What am I thinking about this sidekick version Gill Runt? He's alright. Him looking cute is the only thing he is going with, but just like many of other sidekicks, he is too young or less awesome to wield a weapon like his older counterparts. That is an understandable shame. Also, what is up with their teeth? In comparison, it seems that the Gill Grunt has a noticeable pattern of growth in this reposes. He starts off with a simpler pincer gun that gets hyped whenever he receives a new gun and jetpack upgrade. He then found something that he declared his treasure, takes care of his water serpent pet, and gets a glow up with a weapon that was inspired by a golden anchor he has found long ago. I just love all of these designs, no doubt about it. Both in their character art and their figurines are absolutely amazing looking, because they do reflect on the upgrades you get on each one, and I appreciate the attention to detail that is given, such as making their base as part of their design, to giving them weapons that better reflect on both their Gillman heritage and their prowess and progressions. If you're going to repose the figurines constantly, then this is how you do it. It is consistent, shows an improvement on each one, and I really have less issues to talk about. It did get subdued with Anchor Away Gill Grunt, but overall, many of his designs, especially his original, were all solid. But in terms of being a Skylander in the game, how good are they? When you look at this Gill Grunt's catalog, 3 out of 5 of his figurines hold his trusty harpoon gun, and that is what his moveset is all about. His primary attack is known as a harpoon gun, which by pressing the button will have him shoot one pincer hook at his target. It is straightforward and does a minimum of 20 damage to Spyro's Adventure and Giants. For the first build of the franchise, it is considerable damage that you can deal with Gill Grunt. However, I will state that in Swap Force and Superchargers, he does around 40 damage onto his enemies, while in Trap Team, it's an astonishing 80 damage, twice as big as what it was originally intended. He has received some great buffs in later games, but went down to Superchargers due to the game being made in the same build as Swap Force. That was expected due to Vicarious Visions made both of these games. While Imaginators is similar to the later build in the franchise, even though it was made by the same developer who did Giant Spyros and Trap Team, Twice for Bob, the damage calculator functions differently for the legacy characters, which I will get for Gill Grunt later on. Trap Team is by far the most beneficial buff for Gill Grunt due to his involvement in the Series 4 figurine. But I also believe that these buffs were made due to the bosses that was introduced in the game to further compensate it. Bigger damage could happen because the game wants to provide more obvious feedback for the player to see how much damage they can do, which is great to see for legacy characters like Gill Grunt. You may also notice that by getting a critical damage onto your enemies, which is indicated by the number receiving an exclamation mark, it receives 33% additionally from the original total. Which means in Spyro's Adventure and Giants, a level 1 Gill Grunt can dish out 30 damage each hook. Also, the levels does not influence the damage, but we'll get to that in Imaginators later. What the level does is that it increases the health points that the Skylander receive, which in Gill Grunt's case gives him the additional 30 hit points that was on his health. His secondary attack is known as the Power Hose. By holding the button, Gill Grunt can spray water to damage his enemies for 7 damage in the first 2 games, 20 damage in Swap Force and Superchargers, and 28 damage in Trap Team. In addition of having a limited source, which can run out that force the attack to go into cooldown, which is unfortunate, it can also be used to knock back small opponents. However, the status condition onto them can be unreliable most of the time. Sometimes it can push enemies further, sometimes they do not. It's complicated. What is not complicated is that the harpoon gun can exceed further by having it to be shot far away, which is apparent in Giants. It's not too far to where it exceeds the render, but it still gives the enemies a 20 damage if the range is right. That would mean that you can shoot your enemy a mile away and you have proper spacing to work around with. However, the main issue that Gill Grunt has, especially at the start compared to his other Skylanders from the same starter pack, is his speed. He is indeed powerful, but he is ridiculously slow, causing him to be caught on by his enemies, especially when crowd control is involved. Fortunately, this is where his tertiary attack, the Water Jetpack, comes in, which is his 5th upgrade. It's basically what you expect, a flying move that allows you to fly around and away from your enemies. You may expect him to now travel over water, but in Spyro's Adventure, you can swim over the water without his jetpack upgrade on. And get eaten. Also, after 12 years of playing Leviathan Lagoon, I did not know that you can defeat him by being in his way, blocking it. That is some kind of speedrunner struts right here.
Right, I will say this. I've been playing Skylanders for like 13 years, and I never really thought that you can bump into it in order to knock it out. That has never happened to me before. I am so dummy.
This allows him to become much more mobile and speed himself up. But alas, it was never an attack, until much later. You can both fly and spray water onto your enemies to give yourself more mobility to defeat them, but that can also reduce your tank significantly. So it is likely of a choose wisely situation, which would require a good amount of thinking, timing, and spacing to get it right. When you receive a soul gem in Spyro's Adventure, which is located in a level called Treetop Terrace, you get to unlock his last upgrade, Anchor Cannon. This will no doubt be a cornerstone to Gill Grunt's development. By holding the primary attack button, you will charge your harpoon into a giant anchor and release to shoot. It deals 40 damage in Spyro's Adventure and Giants, 100 in Swamp Force and Superchargers, and 160 in Trap Team. If you do not have Spyro's Adventure, do not worry. You can purchase it by going over to Persephone or the Power Pod in any game afterwards. That is how I done it in Imaginators anyway. This is such a great attack because it deals knockback and great damage. It does take some time to get it up and ready, but depending on which series you were in, you will deliver the mighty blow from the Gillman's wrath. Unfortunately, unlike the jetpack and hose, the anchor does not get infested with combination aside from shooting out of the hook that was already in it to have it charge up. Like I said, you have to be careful on what you are charging it and where are you aiming it, because doing so recklessly will either leave you vulnerable to enemies or miss the target entirely. Did I mention that this fish is slow as funk? I am aware that I am missing the upgrades prior to the Soul Gem, but that's because it is going into the actual upgrading of your Gill Grunt's moveset rather than adding new moves to utilize with. The first of the three is Barb Hook. That increased the damage of the hook by 16 in Trap Team, 4 in Spyro and Giants, and 5 in Swamp Force and Superchargers. This also applies towards your Anchor Cannon, which increased the damage by 32 in Trap Team, 8 in Giants and Spyro's Adventure, and nothing in Swamp Force and Superchargers. That's strange. The upgrade did not apply towards the Soul Gem in these games, which would mean it made the anchor less needed due to the smaller, faster harpoons getting the additional damage boost from it. At least one of the three reposes is okay with it. High pressure power hose increased damage by 18 in Trap Team, another 7 in Spyro's Adventure and Giants, and 6 in Swamp Force and Superchargers. Additionally, it also pushes your enemies back in knockback. I did like the further knockback, but I do not like how it lacks the powerhouse compared to the harpoon upgrades. Just a little bit more into the damage would have fixed the issue from here. Second to last of the basic upgrades is the Harpoon Repeater, which sped up your reload time on your primary attack. While I did notice a slight difference, it is too subtle to say that this is a benefit or a buff. Matter of fact, you would rather charge up your anchor instead of waiting for a slightly more loaded alternative bullet in your weapon. Aside from the Teteri attack unlock, the rest of the three upgrades are self-explanatory, with one not making the grunt more viable than the other three. After upgrading him towards the last of his basics, Gill Grunt has become more apparent that his speed and his attack time is his greatest weakness, and that in turn lead to him being a heavyweight. He did have a cover up by having a jetpack as agility, but unless you have a very high level with him, you're gonna have a slow time. However, he's not always bad, as he managed to become a force to be reckoned with by being a rough range attacker, which still makes up for his sluggish faults. Now we're at the crossroad. There are two pathways that you can choose for your Gill Grunt. One leads to Harpooner, which allows you to further develop Gill Grunt's primary attack. The other is Water Reaper, an upgrade path that develops both your power hose and jetpack. When I first played as Gill Grunt back in 2011, I know that he will fit for a power hose because it has an upgrade that never loses any water. That, and he also lasts like a psychic maniac whenever I use the secondary attack, which is really funny. The Water Weaver has Reserve Water Tank as its first upgrade, which, like I said, removed the cooldown on your power hose and water jetpack, meaning that you will never, ever, 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 ever run out of water. Boiling Water Hose. Imagine the torture on your enemies. Increase your power hose damage with 20 in Trap Team, 32 in Swap Force, and Superchargers. I goofed up again. 6 in Swap Force and Superchargers, and 14 in Spyro's Adventure and Giants. The ultimate upgrade for this pass is Neptune's Gun. When pressing the primary button, you stun at exploding starfishes that deals 20 damage in Spyro's Adventure and Giant, 80 in Trap Team, and 12 in Swap Force and Superchargers. The one thing you must keep in mind is that you have to sacrifice the 3 Harpoon upgrade if you want to have both the infinite supply of water and exploding boiling starfishes. And I will say that this pass is really good. Not only if it benefits Gill Grunt on covering up his sluggish weaknesses, but it provides him with so much flexibility on using the power hose to push the enemies away from you and pump out additional ammo to carry out additional damage. However, the Harpoon pass is not bad either, as, like I said before, gives you a triple shot Harpoon. It is obvious on what it is. Then you get quad-end Harpoons, which increases primary attack damage by another 16 in Trap Team, another 5 in Swap Force and Superchargers, and another 4 in Spyro's Adventure and Giants. Clearly, they have copied and pasted the same buffs as Barb Harpoon, which is never really much of a bad thing. But at the same time, it depends on which game you are playing. This definitely not increased the damage for the Anchor Cannon in Swap Force and Superchargers, but in other games, it did give more of the same with 16 and 4 in their respective games. Its middle upgrade of the pass is Piercing Harpoon, which allows your harpoons to go through your enemies for further damage on others than just having to stick into them. Am I the only one thinking that seeing my enemies pierced to my harpoons is too graphic? With these paths crossed in all of my Gill Grunt iterations, which one of these paths would I recommend? To be honest, for a regular Gill Grunt, it's a toss-up. I was expecting the Water Weaver to be a better path to proceed with Gill Grunt because of its infinite water and the way to get away from an enemy's line if it gets too much, but the Harpoon path can also be superior by how powerful it is. While it has less increase than the power hose, it did improve the harpoons by exceeding its original effect and become much more aggressive. Again, it depends on your playstyle of Gill Grunt. If you want your fish to go fast while causing both spacing and additional damage, go with the Water Weaver. If you really want to be a range shooter but have a tendency to be patient for a bigger reward, then the Harpooner path is for you. Personally, I would have gone with the Water Weaver to overcome his slow movement, but I would not mind going with this Harpoon path to cause some more devastation towards my opponents from afar. Now we got the upgrades out of the way, we got bigger fishes to fry. They have their own unique ultimate upgrades that should wow us Portal Masters. So, let us see what they have to offer. Anchors Away. So that's where Series 3 got its name from. Anchors Away allows Gill Grunt to shoot 3 anchor cannons at once. This would probably be my least favorite out of the 3. It is a giant, more elaborate version of the triple harpoon for the top path. The big reason why this is an issue for me is that it spreads so far in your range that only the central harpoon will hit consistently. The other two will either hit something or end with a fate worse than Bullet Bill from the Mario Bros. Games. I guess that if you were close enough, you would have 2 or 3 anchors hit the same opponent, but that would be risky in higher difficulty, and did I mention that he is slow? I guess that does not break the character significantly, but this does not change up the Gill Grunt, nor emphasize the WoW in his name. Let's just say that while Gill Grunt's design and figurine indicates that he has both paths chosen, it has become clear that the top path was chosen with nothing that changed up. It's just an additional upgrade that is the most pointless of the group. Anchor's management. As the title implies, Gill Grunt maintains control with his anchor by pressing the secondary button, which has him shoot it up in the air and deals damage upon impact. Well, not necessarily on impact, but whenever it drags people in, it deals 20 damage per rotation, which is good. Trap Team functions similarly, with 56 being the impact and 56 at the additional spins. However, it creates an explosion when it finishes with the exact same amount of the anchor cannon with 224 damage on the harpoon path. I find this Wow-Pow to be fun and excellent due to this function as a gateway attack from your enemies. When aligning yourself to get the impact of your enemies, and yes, there is trajectory involved, you can still attack them inside the whirlpool or run away to get more of your spacing. While it would not save your scales when crowd control becomes an issue, it did make the most of its utility by allowing the player to deal incredible damage when your enemy sucks in. In Trap Team, it has received a great buff, so I would recommend using it in that game for the additional core damage. As a veteran Portal Master, this is considered an advanced upgrade due to the requiring some form of effort and planning to land anchor management just right. But it still rewards me even if it lands right on top of their heads or have them drag into the whirlpool during the chase. This is honestly a very fun upgrade that I honestly don't mind using it more times than I should. Like his anchor cannon, it does take a good while to get it ready to shoot upwards, which leaves you vulnerable. But I can guarantee you that you will have the most fun summoning this around your opponents. Also, this is great for defeating food thieves in arena battles in Swap Force. Seriously, this is merciless. Right at the Leviathan. When having the upgrade, you can use the jetpack and then disable it again to summon Gill Grunt's Sorry. Gill Grunt's Leviathan that deals 250 damage during his ride and 400 when he finishes with a splash in Trap Team. In Superchargers, it has received a nerf of 135 and 216 damage respectively. At first glance, its physical form does put you in a risk if you were dealing with the ranged enemies from far away. But I feel that this is the game's magnum opus by having Gill Grunt deflect out how much water he can weave and deals large amount of damage with incredible knockback already made him an awesome threat. Not only this is the most unique out of all of the series reposes in the entire franchise, with the distinction of being the only Series 4, it also utilizes the Sateri upgrade as both an actual attack and a way to gain speed, which in my opinion is an incredible glow up. Normally, I would wait until the end of the video to suggest which one of these Gill Grunts you should go for, but I would state that this is one series you should have in your collection. If you put him on the Water Weaver path, which only makes him so overpowered due to both having this infinite supply of water, increased damage, and exploding starfishes to boost, you will have a blast with him. This is indeed the one that always gives out the wow out of many people who have never seen it up until now. Despite having more reposes than the average Skylanders, a Supercharger repose, and an Eon's Elite, Gill Grunt rarely have any in-game variants outside of those. He only has a few additional chase variants, including the iconic green Gill Grunt variant. However, since I have looked at all of the regular Gill Grunts, it would make more sense to take a look at his apprentice, Gill Runt. He, alongside with the other sidekicks, were originally magic items that you can get in special distributions or small quantities in merchandises when Spyro's Adventure and Giants is relatively new. The way I got Gill Runt is by entering a lollipop contest that gives you a code to see if you have the one that has it. My initial impressions with him is that he is cute. Gill Runt was originally a novelty and a nice limited item to have it in your collection. Nothing more, nothing less. That is, until Trap Team revived them as full-fledged Skylanders that is just like their core counterparts. So much that there is nothing outstanding to speak of. He shares the same upgrades as his original, the same stat boosts, and overall lacked the additional Wow-Pow and just a smaller variant of Gill Grunt. I am sure they are fine as smaller reposes for characters such as Spry for Spyro, Trigger Snappy with Happy, and Hijinks with Hex. But Gill Grunt just recently have a Series 4 in that game, so it just made his appearance in the game less needed. Although there's another mini Skylander that just overstays their welcome. Overall, Gill Runt is a nice addition if you want to have a cute version of Gill Grunt. No need to have it necessarily. And to be honest, I would rather play the OG one that I got in Spyro's Adventure. And that is all of the core versions of Gill Grunt prior to his appearance in Superchargers. And I still think that he does not need all of this stuff. However, I understand why there would be a case for him to return as a playable character so much. The developers love him, the publishers love him, and yes, many of us Portal Masters love this fishy face, including myself. His moveset stems of a range attacker that moves slowly than actual fishes, but at the same time has additional upgrades and paths that is too good to miss out. I even enjoy most of the time to know where I get to play at their reposes because while they have something new to offer, there are also some other things that makes them so great to begin with, such as the Tidal Away Gill Grunt with his Leviathan and Anchor Away Gill Grunt with his Whirlpool Anchor. I should say right now that if you really want to get the most out of your Gill Grunt in a few games, there were some things you can make it better. As far as Adventure and Giants, you can take part in heroic challenges to raise up his critical hit stat and elemental power stat. Unfortunately, his challenge does not correspond to the stat I recommend, but here are many examples of heroic challenges that does give you those rewards and which Skylander you need to unlock them. The reason why I recommend these because that allows your Gill Grunt's Harpoon to have more of a chance to score a critical, which, as I point out, is a massive bane on your enemies. The Elemental Power stat allows you to gain more power on your attacks in areas that has a water zone symbol, which is indicated on screen, and Master Eon saying in the background. Speed is also a good stat to gain for heroic challenges if you're on the Water Reaper path. But the previous three stats are much more valuable to consider. Plus, with great play, Gill Grunt would have been a solid character without those gains. Unfortunately, heroic challenges cannot expand towards Swap Force and onward, but they do have additional hats that definitely raise those stats the same way. So if you really want to get those stats rise while looking very fabulous, then go right ahead. Trinkets can't do jack shit. That's all I can say. Legendary treasures and Swap Force can also raise the stats for all of your Skylanders, so take advantage of those as well. Other than that, that's just nothing I can say or heard about this particular Skylander, so I guess we're done here. Wow, what a pretty good, pleasant character to do an extensive review on. I'm so glad there's nothing complicated that gets in the way. Psst.
Fear the fish.
I'm gonna be really honest with you all. I have very mixed feelings with Superchargers. It does have some good value in it, like the story and its racing mode, but there were some areas that they completely botched it up for me, such as character derailment.
Hey, don't worry about all that, Hugo. That Sky Eater thingy will probably eat us all first.
Why are you the way that you are?
These are horrendous vehicle sections, over-the-top performances,
Prepare, all of you, to meet your most ultimate of ultimate dooms at the hands of Supreme Emperor Chaos!
and this bit.
How do, Skylander?
I hear you're needing some modifications to your vehicle. Well, that'll be no problem whatsoever. The real trick is gonna be upgrading the rev engines with the power of a Jillian lightning bolt and then causing a chain reaction that could destroy literally.
But we are getting sidetracked here. Since we are cooking two fishes in one pot in this section, let's start off easy by talking about the vehicle, the Reef Ripper. As you started off, its weapon, its shield, and stats is what you had to look out for. The two stats that seems to be lacking in both armor and weight, which allows the Reef Ripper to be much more of a speeding sea vehicle. Top speed and handling are the two stats that allows it to get a good turn in both octane battles and racing. There is a very good reason why both of them are included in the Sea Racing Action Pack, because the vehicle was not made to be in either a powerhouse or a wall. Albeit, it can be credible in octane battles and safe areas are considered optional. If you are good enough with its maneuvering and throw in some damage onto your enemies, then that is fine. Speaking of damage, its primary attack allows you to shoot out a spear into your enemies, dealing around 165 minimum and 231 max with a full weapon upgrade. When you place Deep Dive Gill Grunt in the driver's seat, that damage increases considerably with 182 at minimum and go up to 254 damage. For a vehicle, it is very good. I believe that there are some big contenders in the roster, but this is not a bad one. Although, you have to be more attentive with this movement because there are some times where you have to aim it just right to attack your enemies with it. Fortunately, it has a secondary attack that creates a shocking aura around it that deals 300 damage at minimum and 420 at max weapon. Using Gill Grunt will guarantee 360 minimum, 462 maximum. By all account, I would have gone with that combo because it allows the vehicle to proceed as an octane battler while not being a class cannon. But be ready for trial and error when you're starting your game out in the Nightmare difficulty. It also has some modifications that gives you additional stat to make your vehicle look distinctive. It initially appeared with its own gill grill and aquafin turbine, which gives you 10 plus in handling and acceleration respectively. By proceeding into the game, you can get more modification for your Reef Ripper with a Spearfish driver that gives you 10 plus in top speed, Fumpback Prow that gives you 300 plus in armor, Shark Fin Blaster that takes away 5 in weight, but adds in 10 in top speed, and Whale Flipper, which adds it on 5 plus in weight and 150 in armor. If you're Supercharger Reef Ripper with Deep Dive Gill Grunt, this combo will give you 2 last mods, including the Trident Spearheads that gives you the 10 plus in acceleration, and Tidal Wave Crasher which gives you 5 plus in top speed and handling. There are also horns that you can get when going through this game, but I will play each one to show you my favorite of the 4. Okay, that's cute. That sounds appropriate. That sounds like a fart. What the fuck is that? My recommendation on which mods to use will depend on its purpose. If you want to have an incredibly fast that will earn you 3 stars and tracks the fastest, go with the Supercharged modifications, Trident Spearheads, and Tidal Wave Crasher. That is because acceleration will give you boosts on boosters and startups during the race. For octane battling, I suggest go with the Fumpback Prow and Whale Flipper. By slowing down your Reef Ripper and giving more stat to protect itself from enemy fire, it allows you to stay afloat for a good while. However, you still have to be attentive on your radius so you wouldn't get defeated quickly. Still, both mods allows you to be ready to take enemies down and gives you a good placement to get your gear bits. Overall, the Reef Ripper is one of the game's most iconic sea vehicles in the lineup, and for good reasons. While it is not made for battling in mind, and its lack of armor leaves yourself up in the air for defeat if not careful, especially in higher difficulty, it is still viable in both modes that allows you, the Portal Master, to exceed in both Sea Star areas and sea racing tracks. I highly recommend Reef Ripper as your go-to sea vehicle, since you can get fairly priced on eBay, which most of the time bundled with Gill Grunt and or the Sea Racing Action Pack trophy. Gotta get more out of your buck, you know? Now we can get into the main event, which is Deep Dive Gill Grunt, by starting off with his Trident Thrust as his primary attack. By pressing the primary button, you can attack your enemy with 36 damage. When supercharged with the sea vehicle, which you would probably do, this attack does 50. By pressing the button 3 times, you can do it consecutively to deal 3 times the damage. This is a basic 3-stab attack that you would find in Gill Grunt, but I still love the approach of Gill Grunt becoming more physical against his enemies. His secondary attack is his Power of the Seas, like in his Power Hose, sends a range attack of lightning instead of water. Each attack deals 25 damage, but with the Reef Ripper, it does 35 when supercharged. This has one fatal flaw that is quite bothersome, and that would be his inability to stun enemies with it. Seriously, this one spurts out lightning, and yet they couldn't stun these guys? That is a missed opportunity. This also has some lag in and out of his attack, so of course it will leave you considerably vulnerable if not careful. In comparison with his regular counterpart, his walking speed did improve. Slightly. But it has the same issues with Gill Grunt, relying on his upgrade to get more versatility, which, unlike the regular counterpart, is the massive downgrade with the Terry attack, Typhoon Turbine Jetpack. And yes, I do mean his Terry attack, and by pressing either primary or secondary, he can do attacks while in the air. His primary attack, the Dash, deals around 25 damage or 35 when supercharged. His secondary attack, the Water Range attack, can deal 28 damage and 39 when supercharged. His dash attack does get you moving, yes, but I find that to be pretty repetitive compared to just using its jetpack in his regular counterpart. Sure, it has unlimited water now and can deal considerable damage, but I find that to be quite tedious to press the button every time I wanted to go fast. I guess this is still considered an improvement over the regular, but I prefer the original jetpack ability even if you had to wait for the bottom path to get the infinite water. Another one of his weapon upgrades is the Trident True. By holding the primary button, that allows Gill Grunt to repeatedly jab his trident like a rapier and delivers 17 damage and 24 damage when supercharged. This is one solid move for Gill Grunt, because by having it rapidly pierce your enemies while they get stunned, making this an overpowered attack. Keep in mind that its stunning effects are only for small enemies, not big ones. Do you know what else can stun enemies but do a bit more? Wild Whirlwind. Shouldn't it be called Tricky Torrent? Just saying. Holding the secondary button while in the air allows Gill Grunt to become a twister and give your enemies 20 to 28 supercharged damage. Not only this is a fun attack, but a very overpowered one too. While it doesn't do much, it allows you to juggle small enemies into it and keep doing it until either your attack runs out, which you can easily do it again quickly, or keep juggling them until they get defeated. Seriously, why did both upgrades allow Gill Grunt to stun and shock his enemies, but his lightning strike does not? It literally boggles the freaking mind for me. The last upgrade unleashed your trident with Trident Unleashed. Basically, it gives it a shocking aura onto your trident as well to give it a new design, and it can do 19 rapid and 42 strike without the Reef Ripper. It can do 27 rapid and 59 strike damage with the vehicle. While it still does not do shock status, this buff on this trident attack is pretty good to end the basic off. The worst thing about hats is that when your supercharged character wears one, it deals more damage on all of their attacks. Go have fun with that tip. His Soul Gem, which unlike in the previous games you can get them inside these boxes, which is completely randomized, is known as the Storm at the Sea. Get it? You guys get it, right? Never mind. When holding the secondary button, you can bring a storm to your enemies by dealing 40 damage with 20 additional ones roaming around the area. With the Supercharged combo, you can get up to 63 damage with the 28 one around the area. And yet they still did not stun them! Calm, Dash. You are over this. Considering that we have other upgrades that deals more damage than this and has more effects in comparison, this can be underutilized the most by other players. Plus, this has a startup lag that could leave you vulnerable. Way to go, BB! You just opted out his anchor cannon for something that could mean something better. Yet, it isn't. Whoa. I am not expecting this particular Gill Grunt to not only be this deep, but shallow at the same time. If in the case you have not catched on to this is not a good thing. Gill Grunt's natural boost of speed, change of fighting style, and his fun animation is a nice change of pace to see, but his upgrades can be both infuriating and concern. I guess I must have gotten used of having his previous form shoved down my throat in the past 20 minutes of this review, but I have a tendency of not liking the Supercharged reposes compared to their originals. Gill Grunt would be one of those good ones, since it did make it fun to use, but he could have been so much more than a standard fighter. Maybe he could have been some kind of wizard that can do status conditions onto them. He has the right tools for this one, so this wouldn't be that much of a stretch. The original Gill Grunt has his power hose that allows him to not only attack his enemies from far away, but knock them back further to gain spacing. This could have had a similar status condition onto his enemies by basically shocking them. Lightning Rod and Zap are known to have electrifying projectiles that give him a shock condition. Why couldn't this character? Now, Deep Dive Gill Grunt isn't always that terrible, as he can still stun his enemies with his Whirlpool and his Rapier style Trident attack, and they are very fun to execute. Plus, I find this one to be much faster than his original in terms of walking speed, like I said before. But he does not have anything else that makes me prefer this iteration over the previous grunts in the past, since I believe that his moveset is a lot worse than the original. But this is not over yet, as we have two paths to discover for Deep Dive Gill Grunt. The top path featured the Torrent Tamer, which allows you to get the most out of your jetpack ability with the massive waves, and you got the Storm Summoner, which allows you to upgrade your Trident to get the most out of your electrifying attacks. Seriously, why is this a thing? For the sake of my psychological well-being, I'm going to try out the top path first. And the first upgrade that we have is a Wave Jumper, which is basically another way to jump. A regular one does 22 damage upon ascending and descending, while a supercharged one does around 31. Next upgrade is Drive the Wave. This gives out 25 damage and 38 supercharged damage. This upgrade, as well as for his water jump, is good for one reason: hurrying your tail up! It could have been much better by having it do knockback onto your enemies, but this just fixes the individual dashing button issue for me by having to hold down the button to continue dashing. Plus, having the ability to cause damage as you ascend makes this a good motivation to get back to jetpack mode once it's over. The last and middle upgrade to this path is Tubular Tidal Wave. This allows you to send in 3 waves at once on your secondary attack in jetpack mode. Now the damages can go all over the place, but if you kick the dummy, you can get like 35, and the waves can do like 32. In the Supercharged combo, it can do 53 with the kick, and the 48 on the waves. If you recall on what I said about Gill Grunt's Anchors Away Wow-Pow, I do not like how that spreads itself apart and went out so fast that 2 out of the 3 anchors will miss almost every time. This is much slower and in range with your target, so it can be much easier to hit all 3 of them. It is not as strong as the anchor, but I will take this over the Wow-Pow any day. It also has some slight knockback against your enemies, so this is also a pretty good buff. This path improves the issues I have with the water wave attack Gill Grunts have, but unfortunately did not extend further enough to make it more compelling or even more viable like how Gill Grunt's water weaver path did. If Vicarious Visions and the designer of the character were more creative with this character, maybe this can be justifiable. Now we can talk about the Trident and Storm path, and if this does not create static conditions on the enemies by the end of this path, that is okay. The first upgrade in this path is Lightning Strikes, which increases the damage of the Trident Truth to 21 damage and 32 damage in Supercharged combo. Increase is increase, I guess, although that makes this 3-stab attack much more potent by having to go up to 96 with the combo on. Could have been a lot more effective if this was more shocking. Speaking of which, the next upgrade is Shocking Transition. It still doesn't shock your enemies, but it can deliver 25 damage and 35 supercharged damage across your radius. This is quicker and more powerful than the other past jetpack upgrade, as that can send a current across your enemies. Also, this is basically a much quicker and better version of Storm of the Sea. It is less powerful, but it can still get the job done more efficiently. We just have an upgrade that is better than the Soul Gem. What the f? The last upgrade of the pass is Lightning Buildup. It does not hold the button to charge attack like the name implied. Instead, it just increases the damage to 35 and 53 supercharged damage. It still does not sped it up to cover up its vulnerable startup lag, and surprise surprise, no shock implemented. But again, increase is still an increase. Oh my fishing god! Gill Grunt's mohawk fin was cut off! Here's a hat for you, mate. At least you will be stronger with Reef Ripper now. I am so sorry. I remember playing this pass out when I first tried out Deep Dive Gill Grunt, and I had to say it did build up his attack quite well. In comparison with Torrent Tamer, Storm Summoner basically increases the primary and secondary attack and only added a shocking transition when using the jetpack. Unfortunately, this still would have been benefited much more if the shocking status conditions were involved. Maybe Lightning Buildup could have been a charge up move that is, the longer you hold it in, increases the likelihood of stunning your enemies, even spread towards 3 if you're lucky. If they do just that, this would have been a more favorable pathway for any Deep Dive Gill Grunt players. Torrent Tamer just adds an additional effects and damages that does not provide any kind of memorability. If you were to implement these onto another Water Skylander, it would more likely be the same. It's just that generic. At least that path gives you an ability to keep moving with this Drive the Wave upgrade, but that's pretty much all there is to it. Aside from the 3 wave that was for his secondary jetpack attack, I don't really think there's anything that makes this one a lot better than the other. So, unlike the original, I would have gone with the Storm Summoner because while you have to sacrifice a part of you to get it, this feels faster and more flexible in comparison. Furthermore, having a path that upgrades both primary and secondary attacks can make or break your Skylander, and in this case, it makes Deep Dive Gill Grunt well enough. Also, everything that is good about the Teteri attack, such as the Whirlpool Juggle and a much faster ascended descent, is here too. Now, like heroic challenges, there is supercharged challenges that your Gill Grunt can take part with if you manage to get the buzz after you complete the Cloud Kingdom level.
It's been a while since you've been to training, Gill Grunt. Good of you to report for another tour of duty. Fighting pirates keeps me sharp. I've been all across the 11 seas searching for what they took.
Wait. Is he still searching for her? I thought Alex Ness says that he's already rescued her from those pirates. Well, to be honest, Vicarious Visions is known to retcon a lot of things, and since this came from his own interview, maybe the company just did not pick up on that. Action speaks louder than the words, so maybe if it wasn't in the game, then it's technically not canon, as much as they know of. Still though, that's a really stupid way to have Gill Grunt in the game. He basically sends you out to defeat enemies with the jetpack attacks that you have upgraded, go over to a sea vehicle section and defeat your enemies with the Ocean of Evil, which is your primary attack, and his own challenge that is known as Something Fishy, where you have to collect as much fishes as you can before time runs out. Completing each challenge individually will get you 5+ in critical hit, which allows Deep Dive Gill Grunt to hit a critical hit more efficiently, and 10+ maneuvering, with 5+ being in the last 2 challenges. By the way, I will say right now that if you really wanted to get the most out of your Deep Dive Gill Grunt, my suggestion is giving them a hat that contains critical hit, critical multiplier, and elemental power. The reason why I recommend these 3 stats in your hat is because that allows your Gill Grunt to become stronger, and since he has a ranged attack and his physical attacks are being a lot more close up, that will allow you to get the most out of the attacks that you're performing into. Use these on the bottom path and you'll do fine. Overall, Deep Dive Gill Grunt is not necessarily better than the original Gill Grunt, but is more likely to be like an add-on towards the Gill Grunt's legacy. But despite of what I said, I recommend that you should go get this character. It's in the Sea Racing Action Pack, even if you get it in brand new or not. What are you waiting for? It does have some few restrictions of its own compared to the original Gill Grunt lineup, but I still consider this as a good repose in the game, which already has more reposes that does not hit their mark. This one does, and I am extremely happy with it. So, about Imaginators.
Oh my goodness!
Playing the legacy character in Imaginators makes the game look like exploring through an unkept, disgraceful, and intolerable street that is only stable to those who are birthed in it. Senseis and Imaginators. Hats are no longer a thing, and there is nothing you can do to heighten your Skylanders prowess like in the previous games did with heroic challenges, legendary treasure, supercharged challenges. Nothing. Nada. Absolutely nothing is gained from you going into the previous games and do all of this to get something in Imaginators. Everything you have learned from your journey are now completely useless in this barren wasteland full of Imaginite parts and lame looking levels. With paywalls. A great, big, massive number of paywalls! This is the sad world we are living. Unlike the previous 5 games, like I said at the very beginning, Imaginators now have their own calculations that either break or make the characters slightly stronger. That is done to give your Imaginators more power outside of their upgrades, because they need that apparently, and making Senseis impossible to lose. What you see here is the stats that shows Gill Grunt stats in 5 categories: health points, attack, armor, speed, and luck. Attack allows you to give out more damage onto your enemies, armor gives you a good chance to block your enemy's attack, speed makes your Skylanders' movement goes fast, and luck makes you gain more out of treasure chests. If any of these looks familiar to you, that is because this is the only time that they have used the similar stats from character cards that you can get from brand new Skylanders. By that, I mean their symbols. Of course, since Imaginators never made those cards and stats in their own packaging of Senseis, because, as they are still useless to make out. That's right, just like the characters that is from the previous games, the stats that they have based this one off from is completely useless! From this analysis on the entirety of the lineup for Gill Grunts, they all start themselves with 270 hit points, which is a common minimum health for Gill Grunts since the first game. The only exception to this is Eon's Elite Gill Grunt with the maximum of 810, which is pretty darn good. That variation later on gets 2,430 as it reaches level 20. None of the variations have an increase or decrease, and the stats they all have in level 1 is as follows: 10 in attack, which is average, 4 in armor, low but can be covered with its own range of movesets, 2 in speed, which is then overcome by his water weave path, and 6 in luck. He's not going to get any money anytime soon, but at least he has something. That would mean starting off with your Gill Grunt would be similar to what you will be starting off in any of the Toys for Bob games, which is quite fitting. However, depending on the game's difficulty, the game can be too unfair unless they get leveled up quick. Depending on the attack stat boost, a Skylander achieves 1 damage towards their attack as they are not present before. Now, of course, I will not go out of my way and reset my Gill Grunt to see how that goes, because I don't want to. But I will say that by the time you reach level 20, 2 points of damage is added to your attacks, that is from Swap Force. So it's basically 50 plus 2, and 100 plus 4. Gill Grunt at level 20 would receive the following final stat: 60, which is excellent for a legacy character, 29 in armor, 32 in speed surprisingly, and 26 in luck. In Imaginators, yes, this isn't considered a buff after Superchargers, but it is very level dependent. If you were expected to jump into the game with all of your upgrades and did not get your Gill Grunt's level above 18, you will be in for quite of a shock. Get it? Get it? So in this current meta, your Skylander must thrive into this condition by leveling up so they will not get defeated too quickly. Which is for a legacy character like Gill Grunt is a very tall order to drink. Not only you will be make a game harder for yourself for only using Gill Grunt, but it also makes it so unfair for veteran Portal Masters to use their own fast army to beat the game and prefer to use the Senseis and or Imagineers. Although saying that, a level 20 Gill Grunt is never the worst character because thanks to his endearing moveset and Wow-Pow, they can thrive no matter how difficult it is as long as the player is good enough to proceed. As for Deep Dive Gill Grunt, just focus with the bottom and do not use the Soul Gem. Just don't. Imaginators is such a when it comes to legacy characters and how it stands for them. But considering that Gill Grunt is one of those characters that I can say are viable for a playthrough, is a testament that even his NPC appearance can have the Doomlander to fear that fish. Gill Grunt is no doubt one of those characters that is the favorite child, made gracefully by the benevolent ancients that no one dare question about. But putting all that aside and giving Gill Grunt a full-on scope of his lineage, he is actually a pretty good Skylander, and the one that I am glad that he is a staple in the franchise. Although, I can see why playing the Sim 5 games in can be tiring for many fans. Yes, we would rarely get tired of him, and there are times that Wow-Pow and Anchors Away and Tidal Wave immediately change things up. But there are some places that either could have done more like in this Series 2, or just not bothered to exist like in this later reposes. Ultimately, Gill Grunt does not need to exist in more than 1 or 2 games. But if that was the case and reposes are no longer a thing, I would say we missed some great improvement on the character as a whole. Overall, Gill Grunt is both a fun character to play as and a very powerful scholar that will hook up on anyone with his water gun. He has great attack range, excellent upgrades that covers his initial weaknesses such as speed, from okay to great to excellent Wow-Pow upgrades, have one of the best designed vehicle and superchargers, and fit incredible in the starter pack as a strongman of the Faithful Trio. I highly recommend you should get any one of his figurines and give them a go in your Skylanders game. 3 of the iteration that I recommend is the Series 1, Anchors Away from Swap Force, and Tidal Wave from Trap Team. The former is for those who want to experience the classic with no added upgrades, but the other 2 has some of the best Wow-Pow that the franchise has ever made. Like fishes, they are very much in common, and you can get them around the same or even cheaper as retail prices on eBay. You can get Series 1 Gill Grunt bundled with Spyro Trigger Happy, Portal of Power, and the Spyro Adventure game as he is part of the starter pack or even separate. All of the Gill Grunts prior to Superchargers are all released in single packs, and they are indeed very common to find. Am I tired after doing a full review of him? Yes, but at least I can say that after going through the 11 seas with him, there is a very good reason why Gill Grunt is the most famous example of a Skylander, because he solely and proved to be an exceptional example of it, and he is the one that achieved the highest regard from me. He is indeed one pride fish. Hello, this is Dash again. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, give it a like, place your own comments on Gill Grunt, and give it a subscribe for more content like this. This is Dash Storm signing off. Thank you for watching.